Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Psalms. Today we are in Psalm 89. Now, last time we went through and read all 52 verses of the psalm. Today we want to examine what was seen in that psalm and bring some lessons and some important reminders out to us. As you look at this psalm written by Ethan the Ezrahite, and it's going to be written at least at the time of Solomon, and some would even say later than the time of Solomon. But you have a message from this particular individual that is going to relate to the kingdom of Israel, or the kingdom of Judah, actually, in David's lineage, and the commitment that God made to them and the things that are going on at that particular time. Let me show you what I mean in those statements. When you begin with this message about a covenant. Now, oftentimes when we think of a covenant when reading in the Old Testament, we think of the covenant with Moses, the Old Testament law. Or we think of the covenant with Abraham, with the promises that he makes to him in the book of Genesis. But here we have a different covenant that is under consideration because verse 3 says, I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn to my servant David. Your seed I will establish forever and build up your throne to all generations. When you turn over to the book of Second Chronicles, or rather First Chronicles, chapter 17, there you have some of these promises being made. They're also going to be stated in 2 Samuel chapter 7. But here you have God promising that the kingship, the lineage of kings, would remain in the family of David for as long as there were kings in Israel. And that promise is going to be kept. It is going to be kept all the way through the time of the kings, all the way until the kingdom of Judah is going to be taken into Babylonian captivity in 606 BC. But you have this promise that God is going to make to David. And so, as you see the idea of this covenant here in Psalm 89, recognize he's not talking about the Old Testament. He's not talking about the law. He's talking about the promises that he made to David because of David's faithfulness. As the psalm progresses, the next section of the psalm, beginning in verse 5, begins to talk about the power and the glory of the Lord. And verse 6 makes the statement, For who in the heavens can be compared to the Lord, and among the sons of the mighty, who can be likened to the Lord? Who is it that you can take and compare to the power and the grandeur and the awesomeness of God? And he's going to spend the next many verses going through and talking about the various things that stand out in God's relationship with Israel and in God's power toward mankind. As a matter of fact, he's going to state in verse 12, The north and the south you have created them. Tabor and Hermon rejoice in your name. Now, Tabor and Hermon are not individuals, they are mountains of Palestine and of the region. And so you have Mount Hermon and Mount Tabor that are two of the highest peaks in the region. And it is stated that they rejoice in your name. They, in other words, are a message concerning the power and the glory of God. You're going to have many other statements that are going to be made that we don't have time to delve into today. But talking about the glory and the strength and the power and the might of God. And then the promises that God made. Because you drop down to verse 22 and he says, The enemy shall not outwit him, speaking of David and of his descendants. I will beat down his foes before his face and plague those who hate him. But my faithfulness and my mercy shall be with him, and in my name his horn shall be exalted. And so God here makes this promise with all of his might, with all of his glory, with everything that he has said and everything that he has done. He promises to David that he's going to be there with him, that he is going to take care of him and watch out for him, and that he is going to be the one that establishes his kingdom in perpetuity. But then you come down to verse 30, and this is where the psalm shifts somewhat, because everything up till now has been positive. It's been a reminder of the power of God. It's been praising God. It's been glorifying the promises that he makes. But then notice verse 30. He says, "If his sons forsake my law, and do not walk in my judgments, if they break my statutes and do not keep my commandments, then I will punish their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes." God says concerning the sons of David, he knows the heart of David. And he knows the way that David is in his faith toward God. But he says, if his sons forsake my law, the promise was that if the sons of David did not maintain the faith that their father had, then he will punish their transgressions. He will bring their iniquity to an end with stripes. That is exactly what is going on in the days of Ethan. You have this statement that is being made that God has fulfilled his promise to keep the sons of David on the throne, and yet at the same time he is fulfilling his promise as well that if they are faithless individuals, if they refuse to fulfill the covenant, they are going to receive the punishment that has been promised. And so it is that God is going to fulfill that promise. And it's in the midst of God fulfilling that promise that Ethan is going to write this. We don't have an exact timetable, as we've said before. But it's in the midst of a time when Israel and the king of Israel is being punished for his misdeeds, because he says in verse 38, "You have cast off and abhorred. You have been furious with your anointed. You have renounced the covenant of your servant." Now, it doesn't mean he's gone back on it or he's reneged on it, but rather God has brought into place the punishments that were promised if they did not fulfill their side of the bargain. He says in verse 41 that all who pass by the way plunder him. He is a reproach to his neighbors. This is a time of punishment because they have not fulfilled their duties. And then the question comes in verse 46, how long, O Lord? How long is this going to go on? How long are these things going to last? He says in verse 49, "Lord, where are your former loving kindnesses, which you swore to David in your truth?" And the answer is, they are where they always have been. The problem is not with what the Lord has done. The problem is with what man has done, what the sons of David have done in their relationship with him. How long? Until Israel listens, until the sons of David get back to being people of faith, until they continue once again to uphold the covenant that they made with God. And yet the psalm ends in verse 52 with the statement, "Blessed be the Lord forevermore." You have here in this psalm a recognition of the power and the glory and the might of God. But you also have a recognition of how God values the promises that are made, both the promises that he makes, but the promises that we make as well. These are some of the things that I see in Psalm 89. Thank you so much for joining us today and for watching this video. I hope that you'll come back and join us next time when we examine Psalm 90. But until then, have a great day.